back on YouTube.
Hooray!
For
today.
Is that a good thing? Is it a good thing that we're back on YouTube? I don't know.
I don't care.
I really don't care. Well, we do care though. Do we? A little bit?
Only in the sense that it gives us a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
But whatever.
It shouldn't be too hard for people to figure out, like... It shouldn't be too hard for us to stay within the limits, the rather extreme limits imposed by YouTube on what you can and can't say. But you
don't know what those limits are.
Well...
Because, like I said the last show, Russell Brand can say exactly the same things, but the limits are carved around him because of the size of his audience.
Okay.
See? Strictly.
So it depends on the person.
Yeah, I would just caveat everything with, we fully agree with 100% with everything the authorities say on it. And then, go into the... Just say the news. What's the latest study or what's the latest news?
It sounds farcical, though.
Yes, but we live in farcical times. Everything's farcical.
I mean, I don't think anybody, even YouTube, wouldn't expect everybody to agree with everything the authorities say, right?
That's literally what their line says. It says medical misinformation category. Okay, and then the explanation of that is anything that may sound like it may contravene the advice of the health authorities. And they give two examples. One, the American one, the CDC, and the other, the World Health Organization, international UN body, will be nixed or will be taken off YouTube. It will be a strike. That may sound like, I mean, Jesus Christ, you can't. If we just say, okay, so here's a news item from NBC News. It says here on NBC News, the latest about the jabby. I don't even want to say it for fear of alerting the AI, right? I suppose if our opinion is anything less than, oh, well, that's interesting. What's the name of that? The English guy, ex-NHS, Dr. John
Campbell. Yeah.
Campbell. He wasn't a doctor, but he was a senior nurse. Yeah, I mean, his content is leading to the same... He himself is articulating the same conclusions, and he's meticulous in which state he's selecting.
He had one video removed, though.
Did he?
Yeah.
He had one, okay. Still, though, at this point, every other video he's coming with the latest data he's using from ONS or whoever is coming to the same inexorable conclusion that we just stated outright.
I don't think it's details that they care about. It's more about your attitude. It's your attitude the attitude that they get from the individuals like you and me, basically, who are speaking publicly. Let's say, if they get the wrong feel from us,
okay, but you're assuming a person is actually watching our videos.
I think it is.
I think Scott has explained to us it's most likely an AI.
Well, how do you explain
it's a
that
bot that's just triggered by a word.
How do you explain the Russell Brand thing then? By that, a bot should cancel him too.
They actively remove it because of the size of his audience, so that when he mentions any of the words connected with that incident 2 years ago, or that global event, then the normal controls are no longer on his channel, so to speak. So there isn't a bot that goes, oh, he just said one of the words. I think if we just say the word, I don't think anyone's actually watching our channel and going, I don't like the political attitude of these guys.
Really? So, but that would suggest that then
I am surprised, though, although...
But how do they make that determination even with maybe AI is very advanced, whatever, but that would suggest that a lot of channels out there are all getting either their videos deleted or getting banned completely because a lot of them are all saying those words, right, that are getting flagged. And then, you know what I mean? I don't understand the process. I can understand how AI or some kind of algorithm would flag words, right? But then how does it decide whether the context in which those words were being used? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, it's machine learning.
Is it that advanced?
Yeah, it's like they, it's kind of like this thing where what was it called? I can't remember the name of it. Google's supposed AI that the guy got fired because he said it was sentient.
Yeah.
And like all it does is it goes and it scans all the words and phrases everywhere, and like it, like machine learning can understand context.
And there's
like
some
when
criteria.
It's kind of like I guess like an analogy or another example would be like if you use Google Translate or DeepL, Like some of them are better than others, but basically like it understands the context of certain words. So like it'll adjust the spelling or
And they're
adjust the
getting better
grammar,
and better all the time.
and it's getting better and better. So what they've like, you know, it seems to me anyway that what they're doing is they're applying their best and brightest to the algorithm, which is actually, it's even factoring in like, oh, it's Russell Brand, he's super famous, and he brings us a lot of money because we get to show lots of ads and so on and so forth. So, right, he's allowed to say stuff that, or, you know,
Right.
oh, Joe
And
Rogan, he was offered, you know, 100 million by Spotify, so we'll let him get away with saying stuff
Right.
that, like, NewsReal with Joe and Niall can't say because, and that's actually built into the, because YouTube doesn't make a lot of money. They actually are like kind of like a money pit that sucks income from Google, which makes sense because when you have 63 years of video uploaded every day, that's a lot of servers and
Yeah.
bandwidth and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's all just,
It's
I don't think any human ever touches it.
Well, I think there's probably assessments made on people like Russell Brand and stuff, people with a lot of subscribers, that it would look bad for YouTube. They don't want
Yeah.
necessarily the public fallout from, you know, being pitched as censoring. You know what I mean? They would have a lot of people, a lot of those subscribers would complain, and it would, you know what I mean? There's probably that element to it as well in terms of their own public image, where they can get away with deleting smaller channels like ours, and nobody cares, or there's not enough people who care, whereas bigger ones, people would care. So there must be some level of actual human oversight at some level on that point, like of Russell Brand. Someone
Yeah.
must decide remove those
Yeah.
strictures on Brand's channel because he has so many subscribers.
Probably.
So it's a nexus of AI and RI. Real intelligence, but it's not real intelligence. It's
yeah.
AI and SI, artificial intelligence and stupid intelligence, which is the human beings at YouTube.
Well, yeah.
that get us-
Yes and no, but
You like to criticize YouTube and not get banned?
they came in with a sword, all of them, at various points, but only a few real points from 2016 to 6 years later today. And just demonetized en masse, banned some en masse. But the main method they used was to massively reduce visibility and interconnectivity using various metrics of most. And we know they did that. They said they did that. They had what do they call psychographic maps of the worst disinformation sites. And SOT.net, though it isn't a big player at all, was still popped up routinely in both British and American government-backed studies, in quotes, some of them academic papers, that produced these maps that were then put all over the mainstream media. And they made lists.
That was a bit Russian.
And then they
distance.
just had to go to about 100 sites and reduce it. We've seen it on Facebook where the count of likes for support page of SOT.net reached
Stopped.
an upper limit and just stopped.
Right.
Was reduced a little here and there, but it just stopped.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, break. Same thing on YouTube. Go on YouTube, type in anything. Doesn't matter if you're looking for something quite specific or old or definitely in the conspiracy field, you know. The first 100, you can scroll all the way down. They're all mainstream reports. They've since talked about that they explicitly made that a policy. You will only get partners at the high visibility, at the point of the first return of searches.
Right.
It doesn't matter what your subject matter is, you know.
Well, on that point, I mean, it's not just talking about Facebook and it's not just obviously YouTube, these kind of platforms. Just throw out one up there, Scotty. This is from a couple of days ago from the BBC. BBC is kind of not in the headline, but they're tooting their own horn basically for engaging in censorship. This is anti-vax groups use carrot emojis to hide Facebook posts. That's the title. So there's anti-vax groups on Facebook who, as this title says, we're using carrot emojis instead of to refer to the COVID vaccine. And they were getting away because they were hiding, reference the word vaccine by using this carrot emoji from automated moderation tools. And the BBC has seen several groups, one with hundreds of thousands of members, in which the emoji appears in the place of the word vaccine. Facebook's algorithms tend to focus on words rather than images. And the groups are being used to share unverified claims of people being either injured or killed by vaccines. Now, once the BBC alerted Facebook's parent company, Meta, the groups were removed. So the BBC, doing their civic duty,
Of course.
got in there to stop. And some of them were like 250,000 people. So you have 250,000 people on there
Yeah.
who are either interested or directly involved in personal, with personal testimony,
yeah, because
personal
they knew
experience.
people who were
Either they knew people
affected by the carrot.
or they themselves were affected by the carrot and negatively affected by the carrot, let's say, and they wanted to talk about it on Facebook. And BBC went and did a lot of Facebook's work for it, I suppose, because Facebook is supposedly meant to be policing this evil content of people talking about something that isn't allowed to be talked about. But they obviously weren't doing a good enough job, so the BBC had to come in and do its own research and then say, hey, Facebook, you got some
But
disinfo on your channel there.
This is how the whole structure is now. The mainstream, in conjunction with think tanks, are alerting social media platforms. No, it means they're policing them. And of course, the social media platforms bend over to them every time. BBC obviously is more state-owned, but it doesn't matter. Private or state-owned, these days, they all get their money, bulk of their money from the government. They don't even get it from advertising anymore. It's straight government money. These are 100%, in the classical sense of the term, fascist, corporate and state merger-controlled organizations. So that type of thing, that snitching is going on. It's happened hundreds of times in the last 6 years. It's now, well, Jesus, I mean, it's a good chunk of the actual content of news reporting.
Yeah, it's
News reporting is reporting back to people what people themselves already know because they're talking about it with their friends on social media. Here, people, here's the news. The news is what you're talking about is banned. That's basically
you're not
the
allowed.
news.
You're not
today.
allowed to think about that. Basically,
No.
Don't talk about that with your
To
friends.
think about it is to be a dissident. To be a dissident is to risk losing your credit or your standing in the community.
I saw some snippets from a popular UK soap, Coronation Street, where people were saying that they were an episode of Coronation Street, which is a soap opera, UK soap opera, that's been running for like 40 years or something, and they had a segment on it where two of the characters in the soap opera were talking about conspiracy theories, and one of them was kind of going, yeah, kind of like a bit of conspiracy theory. Nah, and the other one was like, is that really bad? You shouldn't do that. You're just like, what I mean? So it's almost like they're trying to get that. Either they're doing it on purpose, or it's just part of the dominant discourse now, where it's inserted into soap operas, where quote unquote conspiracy theory is taboo, basically, and young people, teenagers shouldn't be talking about anything that's called a conspiracy theory.
I'm pretty sure it's done deliberately.
Yeah.
That's not just
Well,
a quirk of the social fabric. I think that's
that government advisor telling the
of
producers
course
of
those
Coronation
long
Street?
running shows are.
Yeah. So does that mean we can't talk about anything about vaccines?
What else do you want to say?
No, but can I provide any updated information about stuff like that? No.
You can if you want, but
in
buy
trouble.
YouTube.
See you later.
Go for it. I don't care. Really, I don't. But if you want to have a stab at just reporting what's being reported elsewhere, go for it. And I'll just, nod and.
Well,
before you do, we do want to say the main topic I think we want to get into is the SCO summit in Central Asia this week, and all the flare-ups of border wars of a whole bunch of countries across the region. So we will be getting into that. But okay.
We'll get the suspect stuff out of the way first.
Okay.
Okay. So the first thing I noticed was there's an ad, an American ad. This is it for myocarditis in children. It's a new thing, I suppose, because I've never seen an ad. I'm not aware of there being ads before for warning children about myocarditis. Anyway, just play it there.
I've been into fashion since I can remember. But one day I had a stomachache so bad I didn't want to do anything. The team at New York Presbyterian said it was actually my heart. It was severely swollen. Something called myocarditis. But doctors gave me medicines and used machines to control my heartbeat. They've saved me. So now I can become the next great fashion designer.
There you go, stay amazing. So,
Okay.
The reason that kind of stood out for me is, I mean, I think it's is it fair to say that there is some, when by fair I mean, are we allowed to say that there is some evidence that in some cases, both COVID and the carrot can cause myocarditis in some people?
Sounds fair to me, but I'll just email my contact here at YouTube. YouTube says no.
No?
No.
Okay, well, I'll retract that statement then. So I pretend I didn't say that. There's also another one that jumped out was, this is from the British Heart Foundation. So this is the other side of the Atlantic, and it's kind of weird. I'm not really sure what they're trying to say, but well, you'll see for yourself.
Arms in. Okay. Now, you can have a great first date. I promise. All right? Give me that nose.
Kid.
He was a scientific hypothesis. He was a groundbreaking innovation.
Boom.
And the future breakthrough that could cure her is closer than ever. With our research, we can keep saving lives like hers. Donate now to turn science fiction into reality.
So it seems like it's a.
Creepy.
It's the British Heart Foundation. That's the YouTube channel, the British Heart Foundation, and I mean it's obviously talking in general about heart problems, I suppose, among obviously young people. But I just thought it was interesting that they showed, you know, the girl playing soccer and falling, because that is something that people have noticed, that there appears to have been a larger than normal number of people over the past year or so, 18 months. Sports people playing sports, high-level sports, collapsing, and quite a few of them actually dying. Not all of them, but some of them dying, some of them just collapsing on the pitch and stuff, on whatever sport they were playing. Most notable, let's say, for example, in football, soccer, because there's a lot of people play soccer, particularly in Europe. There's more people in Europe than there is in the US, and also
was that ever
basketball.
I'm sure they fact checked that. So, did they do like comparative? Is there any way to aggregate data going back decades?
Well,
Ideally?
now you're getting yourself in trouble, though. if you do
Jesus
that.
Christ! Well, you're suggesting that this is an interesting, an unusual thing. So,
Just drawing a correlation and wondering if there's any connection, you know. But well, this actually is there are people who have put together. I mean, there is data. If you just throw that one up there, this is from Real Science. It's a online journal, and now the title there, you know, maybe that's a bit too, you know, matter of fact in a certain sense. But anyway, in the past 18 months or so, there's been 1,350 recorded athletic cardiac arrests and serious heart issues, and 919 of them have died. If you just scroll down to prior year data, so the International Olympic Committee in Lausanne in Switzerland studied documents from 1966 to 2004, and they indicated 1,101 sudden deaths in athletes under 35 years of age, which was an average of, that's over that period of time, so an average of 25 athletes per year. Then you had from 1980...
29. Okay.
Sorry, 29. So from 1980 to 2006, you had 1,866 deaths, similar deaths of athletes, and that's 66 per year. Sorry, I don't know how many that is per year. That's something like maybe 40 or so per year. But anyway, from 2005 to 2006, there were 66 deaths per year. So basically not a lot. Back years ago, it's increased over the years from 1966 till today. It's been increasing, but still, it's in
The population has increased.
Of
a
course,
lot
yeah.
since then.
So it's been, but it's still it's double digits basically, you know, over that period of time, from say, you know, the 20s to the 40s to the 66, let's say, from from 2005 to 2006. Over those 2 years, it was 66 per year. But in the past 18 months, you've had over 1,000. So that's all I have to say about
And this is
War
in the
Vietnam.
US? No, globally.
Globally. It's just in terms of recorded. Of course, there's not a lot of, the collecting of data on athletes is, it's been done kind of. There's no, I don't think there's any official studies on it, let's say, but I think everybody who has been paying attention probably would agree, wouldn't be surprised to hear that there has been an uptick in athletes having heart issues or dying on the pitch. It was quite prominent there. Of course, it wasn't talked about. There's no, I don't think there's any official scientific studies have been done on it, etc., except for this collection of data, basically. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. Moving on. I'm not drawing any conclusions whatsoever.
Okay.
The Queen.
The Queen, is she still dead? I
She
just
is.
wanted to check. Because something you never know these days. Fake news, real news. Sometimes there have been many incidents in the past where there are fake news headlines,
Yeah.
So and so's died. Really? And then everyone shares it, and then everyone gets scolded for spreading fake news.
Right, it's not.
Hang on a second.
It's not disinformation. It's been going on for quite a long time, and it has dominated. I mean, I suppose if you're not in the Anglosphere, you're probably not getting so much of it, or if you don't kind of speak and read English, you're not getting so much of it. But if you, any of the English broadsheets, basically the BBC, Guardian, the Telegraph, the Times, etc., it's just been wall to wall for the past 10 days, almost 10 days. When did she die? 8th? Yeah, pretty much past 10 days. It's the 18th today. So, and then tomorrow she's being buried, and I think that'll put an end to it, more or less. Although there'll be some, they'll drag it out a little bit for a few more days, I
Oh,
suppose.
they'll drag it out all the way to next year when the coronation happens.
Yeah, well, hopefully there'll be a lull in between. But it really has been wall to wall on the English press. Just their websites are just blanketed, as are their actual physical papers. Headlines completely dominated by all the goings on amongst the royal family and intrigue, and but everything you could possibly get out of it is being dragged out of it.
Does it surprise you?
It does actually surprise me.
This
It's
is
well,
the British Queen we're talking about.
I know, but
And if
apparently
she is supposedly a
over the past-
goddess
she's
in
been lying.
manifest for them. Well,
Well, for who? But how many? That's the thing. What the question that I mean, I have no problem with it, right? For the people who have a kind of a hero in that sense, or someone who's symbolically very important to them who dies, and they make a big deal of the funeral and all that kind of stuff. But she's been lying in state for the past 3 days, and lying in a state, in not a very good state. For the past 3 days, and
I got conspiracy chatter that that's not really her in the
whatever.
box.
Who is it? Diana,
That's just rubbish, is it?
probably.
No, well, the idea was that it was empty, and that is
Oh,
for reasons of safety, public safety,
case somebody grabs it and-
security, grabs her, desecrates, just something awful. I don't know.
that wouldn't surprise me at all. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, I think there was one guy there a couple of days ago who tried to who kind of rushed towards the coffin, and the
Yeah.
cops took him down. Yeah, I think he was just very emotional and wanted to get a bit closer. Anyway, she's been lying in state for 3 days, and 1 million people apparently have filed past. Some of them waiting, a lot of them waiting for hours and hours, like up to 12 hours in a line, to just file past the coffin in this cathedral. And to
St. Paul's,
No, the-
Westminster.
yeah, can't remember exactly what it's called, but anyway, the thing is, 1 million people out of, well, there's 66 million people in the UK. 60-70% of those adults, so say 40 million people. Only 1 million of them actually bothered to go and view the coffin. So it's quite a small percentage. What does that say about the rest of them? That they don't really care very much? That's sad, the Queen died, but she had a good run in. She was 96. God love her. Rest in peace. That Charlie, he'll be a problem. Anyway, moving on, right? But no, we're not moving on. It's 10 days of really projecting it and promoting it to the population as, like this guy, the Speaker of the House, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, he's the Speaker of the House of Commons, so it's a fairly high level position in
Like Pelosi, I suppose.
he's kind of like Pelosi, yeah. He, I suppose, summed up the attitude of that demographic of the political elite, essentially, and politicians and those kind of people by saying this.
We should not allow anything to overshadow the most important event the world will ever see, and that's the funeral of Her Majesty and the passing of Her Majesty.
Her Majesty.
Yeah, so the most important event the world will ever see, according
Yeah.
to him.
Yeah.
And I suppose that means has ever seen and will ever see into the future.
More important than JC.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he's fictional, but whatever. You know, to a lot of people, it's
Well,
real.
everything, no matter what you can think of, it's the most important event in the history of the world. So, I don't know. I suppose it's an opportunity for the British state to promote itself effectively and its awesomeness, and the awesomeness of its monarch, and by implication the awesomeness of its parliament that's appointed by her, and to a certain extent the awesomeness of its culture and its people. Right? It's a
And the
It's an
rules-based
advertising-
order it created.
Yes, it's an advertising opportunity, absolutely. Now, whether the advertisement actually matches the reality of the British state and British culture and the British people and stuff. Jordan Peterson is quite a fan of the English, and I think that's something particular to him almost, but also particular to a lot of Canadians, but of his personality type. Let's say that there's in a lot of the Commonwealth, like Australia, maybe not, partly in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, and other Commonwealth countries, they almost feel
Northern Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. They feel that they're second class in a certain sense, that they're the offshoots of something great, of this, that they owe their existence.
Oh, they do.
Yeah, to the British. So everything great that they have, everything awesome about their lifestyle and their culture and their society, is owed. Let's go back to the hallowed, the holiest of holies, where it all began type thing. There's this attitude, it seems, in a lot of people like that, who haven't spent much time in the UK for most of their lives, have no real, awareness of. They don't know Englishness, let's say, up close and personal. They have a very nostalgic. It's also in America a lot, in a certain sense. The Americans, a lot of Americans, maybe mostly conservative types, have this kind of nostalgic, idealistic view of England, Englishness, Big Ben, black beefeaters, black taxi cabs, and the Queen, and
Yeah.
English country gardens.
That's only one level to it, though.
But I think that's the level that most of them operate at.
There's another one, though. Even the ones that are, no, I'm Republican, anti-Commonwealth, I'm even anti-empire. Still don't quite realize the extent to which their secular, just the very outlook of the world. If they see the West as the best, or maybe they don't even, they just see the Anglophone, the Anglosphere in general, as the world, the international community. That is a product of Britishism in more general terms.
Yeah.
It goes. Britain is the fount of liberalism, philosophically, spiritually. I'm talking on the secular plane. Never mind whether or not they're actually in for
Of
the
liberalism?
Queen and the pomp and circumstance of
It's the
the
fount
actual monarchy.
It's the fount of liberalism
Yeah.
to these people.
Parliamentary democracy.
Okay.
Two sides facing off, one party, two-party vote. That's
Right.
Britain.
But how can you be so enamored with a monarch then? Which is really the opposite of that, or at least traditionally was the opposite of that. It's like it's kind of dictatorial rule, albeit divinely ordained. It's dictatorial rule, right? You can't be a fan of
It's complex.
liberal democracies. Always complex.
Because British parliamentary democracy is a product of Britain.
Yeah.
And its constitutional monarchy is wrapped up in that system. I mean, when the United States breaks free for independence, supposedly, from the King of Britain, it sets up a parliamentary democracy. France too, the Republic. It's all-
Independence from the king. So you shouldn't glorify a monarch, and you shouldn't be so enamored with monarchy, right?
right, but then look what's happened, the special relationship. Anglo-American, everything. Our closest ally. who's leading who there. It's not always clear. Materially, it's obvious. America is definitely the top dog, and from Tony Blair being lampooned as Bush's poodle, we've always, in a modern time, recent decades, seen Britain as airstrip one, as Orwell put it, the understudy to, the American foothold in Europe.
Yeah.
That's on a material level, yeah, but the ideological, there's something much bigger. Everything. The tenets of science. The first papers that said smoking tobacco would kill you. That was all British science.
Mm-hmm.
The first papers that switched conservation of environment, the original green movement, into CO2 is killing us all, was British from start to finish.
I think,
So there's a lot more than.
I think it's an appeal to, or it's appealing to a lot of people because it's something higher than themselves. It's almost like it takes the place of God. Or it's the transcendent. I mean,
Yeah,
the Queen,
and even
the
when
Queen
you take,
is,
what I'm saying, even when you take the monarchy, the secular scientific one is still there as well.
absolutely. Just look at this, for example. This is from the. It's a think tank in the UK called the Resolution Foundation, and their mission is that they're working to improve the lives of people on low to middle incomes in the UK, right? So for low income families, right? But they say that not only is, don't forget the fact that as awesome as the Queen is, and she should be celebrated, there's a big benefit to her, to having the Queen, or Queen Elizabeth in particular, is that she oversaw the fastest economic growth of any monarch in our past, and very possibly our future too. So they're correlating the existence of QE2, of Elizabeth, with the fastest economic growth of any, in the UK's history. And this is a group that is trying to improve the welfare of low-income families. And they're ascribing
a good monarch as cause, as benefactor for ordinary Britons.
yeah, but also as the source of economic prosperity.
But it's interesting to note the correlation. I know that what that means.
But does
is
it mean?
open-
Does it mean? Because they
wide
say
open to
QE2,
debate.
right? Does that mean though that now that she's gone, it's going to fall off a cliff? It may happen that way,
I think so.
but there may not be a correlation, or a very vague, a very abstract correlation. Let's say.
But yeah,
If that happens,
It's interesting,
I mean,
though.
it'll imagine this time next year the UK is in a serious recession.
Mm-hmm.
These people will feel fully justified in saying, "See, we told you." Is there any truth to it? Probably not. Don't know. If there is, it's not. There's not a direct correlation. Let's say it's very indirect. But not everybody's happy about the Queen. The Queen dying, as you may know. I mean, you're not. Oh, no, not everybody's unhappy about the Queen dying. Sorry, I mean some people are, at the very least, ambivalent. There's a Scottish football team with a long history. They're called Celtic. They're basically they're representatives, let's say, of Scottish and Irish Catholic working class families, let's say, and that's their whole history. And there was they were playing a match. They're in the Premier League basically in Scotland, and they were playing a match, and there was, I think they might have been against whatever other team they were playing against, and there was a minute's applause was scheduled at the beginning of the match for the royal family, and so they just played there. The Celtic supporters decided to do this. Did this as because everybody else, apart from them, were clapping their hands as the 1 minute's applause.
right.
But they were joining everybody who was clapping their hands if you were doing this. You were. So it was kind of very naughty. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be on the side of the extreme anarcho-communist types who would, hate the royal family and think it should be brought down and they're evil, corrupt parasites on society and it should never have existed, etc. Because, like I said, I think it symbolically any monarchy, but particularly in the UK, represents something transcendent, effectively at a deeper psychological level for many people, for the people who are drawn to it in that way. And I wouldn't deny anybody that, basically. I think that's better than nothing, better than having no vision or idea of the transcendent, let's say. However you get it, as long as it's transcendent and bigger than you, better than you, more noble than you, better in all the positive ways, not just as in richer or something, but that's actually part of it as well. They're meant to be better than you in every way, which includes financially, let's say. That's why it's fine, it's allowed for the royal family to have access to large amounts of money because, well, God has a lot of money, right? Anyway,
Yeah, I flirt with the idea that monarchy should make a comeback, big time,
Yeah.
everywhere.
Depends which type, I suppose, though.
But just in the broadest sense, if you look at the most stable periods for either countries, empires, or regions, whatever, they do, over a broad sweep of history, correlate with long-lasting monarchs.
What does?
Peace and prosperity,
Right.
basically, yeah. That's true in Russia as it is in Western Europe
Mm-hmm.
and elsewhere.
Okay. Well, okay, so we'll move on from those two topics.
What about MAGA communism?
It sounds funny. We were talking about there when it first popped up on Twitter and stuff. It's kind of funny, but it's a good idea if you listen to the people who actually are being serious about it and they're not LARPing, basically. They're not making fun of it. Well, they're basically saying, listen, Trump was, because it was in relation to recent threatened strikes, real worker strikes
Yeah.
in the US, right, which were going to be, I think they cancelled the strike or whatever. But people who are MAGA enthusiasts, Trump supporters, said, listen, there should be a joining together
Yeah.
of union members, basically, of these large industries in the US with Trump supporters, like who are not, blue collar workers, let's say, because they both want the same thing. They both want better lives, better livelihoods, better conditions, better prospects for lower, middle, and especially lower income families.
And they
in
both
America.
want to destroy the intelligence community.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they both have the same.
Abolish the FBI, the CIA, NSA, etc.
They have the same vision, yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a natural. I mean, I would have always thought they're more or less the same people anyway, in a certain sense. You know what I mean? That the vast majority of blue collar workers in the US probably were Trump supporters. Probably are or were Trump supporters, or at least MAGA supporters, if you want to call it that. Whatever that means now, with or without Trump. Populism, American populism, basically,
Yeah.
which is a naughty word, populism. But what it really means is basically power to the people, right? The majority
Yeah,
of
well,
people
it means
who are working class people,
coming together
working
of
people.
left and right.
Mm.
Have a look at this one. This is how the other side sees it. Somebody posted a whole bunch of these. There's actually been dozens of similar characterizations as this one since Trump was elected in 2016. Now, take in what you're seeing there. Obviously, that's
Trump
a
as
depiction
Lenin.
of Trump looking pretty awesome, I have to say.
As Lenin.
As Lenin, Trump's permanent revolution. Subtext, subheadline: the right-wing Leninists quote smashing up the state. Now, I'm not sure when that was.
How do we get the
published.
right wing Leninism?
2020. Now, the interesting about this is New Statesman is a nominally leftist publication.
Right.
British, I think.
Jeez, it's so messed up. That is
Leftist. So, what the MAGA communist guys are saying over and over is we hate the left that's in power. We do not. You can call them communists if you want, but that ain't us. And they point to these kinds of things. That's
Right.
the left, New Statesman. That's how they see Trump. We're cool with that.
hmm
So it's an interesting juxtaposition of things. One of the funniest things this week that made MAGA communism go as a hashtag several times trending on American Twitter anyway all week long, is that Trump Trump took it up and started using it over on his site, Truth Social.
Yeah.
Thousands and tens of thousands of retweets and likes. His base apparently has no problem with it.
Explain right-wing Leninism to me.
I suppose it's simply at the basic essential level. It's that you have someone who comes coming in and he wants to do a revolution on the status quo. Now, which parts of it are left and right we can discuss, but that's basically it. It's the entrenched interests and powers are saying he's a threat to our system, our status quo. And so if you're left or right, it doesn't matter where you're coming from, how you've traditionally seen things. What did or did not, what got you as a rabid anti-Trump supporter, anti-Trumper or a Trump supporter in 2016 was whether you could recognize that that's what he was, that what he represented.
So it's just overthrowing it. It's not left or right.
It's
just
actually
overthrowing
preserving and saving.
No, but
it's far more constructive.
from their perspective.
It's both constructive and...
But from their perspective, it's overthrowing the established order.
Yes.
Which is what? We don't even know what to call that anymore. It's just the
The
established order.
rules-based international order, the liberal international order, they have different
call even
monikers
liberal.
for it.
Yeah, but those terms mean nothing anymore because like right-wing Leninism with Trump as Lenin, but didn't Trump want to be kind of like he was almost like a king. He wanted to rule as a monarch in a certain sense, and certainly Leninism overthrew the Russian royal family. That's not what.
Yeah, but Lenin acted like a monarch and is revered as such even to this day,
Yeah.
to some extent. I mean, he's still in a mausoleum in Red Square. There are Russian Tsars who weren't in a mausoleum in Red Square.
Yeah.
There are more
Right.
statues to Lenin all over the old Russian Empire than there
So basically,
are
what they're saying
Russian
is
emperors.
when they say right-wing Leninism, they mean a right-wing coup, essentially, a right-wing overthrowing of the established order, which is an established Washington establishment,
but
entrenched.
using the working class.
Right.
So
using
they'll
ordinary
call
people.
it right wing, which they have, of course, very loudly over the last 6 years. But it falls apart when you start to look at it. That's why this hashtag is funny, because it's actually a more realistic portrayal of what we're looking at. It's substantially working class, i.e., it's the old left's base threatening, as they see it, to overthrow
Right.
the established order.
Right. So it's populism. You should sum it up by populism.
Yeah.
Effectively. Okay. Weird, but it's just an example of how messed up things have become. Or now nothing makes any sense. And like you just said, it's what they're dealing with here is an establishment in the Anglo-American establishment who rules the international community, let's say, and any threat from anywhere to them is slandered and demonized and called whatever is most appropriate to call them.
Yes,
They're
and an important factor is that their ideological cloak changes. We've seen this change in our lifetime. And it really came to the fore in 2016, but it was roughly over the last decade when they donned the cloak of caring, of the left, of the social good, you know, peace and love and all this nonsense. They took the left's interest and shrouded. People like Chris Hedges, the American journalist, was writing books like in the Bush era, in the early 2000s, warning, and he wrote a book by that title, that fascism will come to America wrapped in the American flag. He got it wrong. It came to America wrapped in, among other things, LGBT, the current thing,
Be careful.
social values, very, very much the left's talking points, anti-racism, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's how it arrived, not wrapped in the. So the order, the status quo, has changed like a chameleon in front of our eyes in our lifetime. So of course the responding dialectic in how we the people think of our real interests versus the elite's interests is going to be on shifting sand as well as
Right.
testing. That's why literally monarchism is, certainly in France, I don't know about, well, the US never had it, but is a fairly serious interest that people have today, because they're like, geez, we've been through so many revolutions, all these republics.
And things aren't going
and
well.
things are shit.
Yeah.
You know,
Bring it back, yeah.
bring something like that back.
Yeah. This is an example of what I was talking about as well, is the playing with words. It's kind of bizarre. It's just from recent news. Hungary. So the EU have decided that Hungary is no longer a full democracy, but they're now an electoral autocracy. What's an electoral autocracy?
See, they have
Yeah.
they have to change. They have to change terms to make everything fit.
It's like most Hungarians want a strong leader who takes decisions that are against the current thing, let's say, against the dominant discourse as established by the Anglo-American establishment. And for that reason, they're bad, and that system in Hungary is bad. But they can call it whatever they want, and they have to make up ridiculous terms like electoral autocracy to explain it. But what they're saying is that Hungary, as represented by the people of Hungary who have elected and re-elected Viktor Orban, are bad because of the policies that they're pursuing, which go against the policies that the EU and the Anglo-American establishment, let's say, stand for, which is this extreme liberalism, it seems, and destruction of what could be called traditional values, let's say, and moving things along at a breakneck speed and destroying kind of institutions and traditions and stuff that people hold to. And it seems that in Hungary there's some pushback, much more pushback than in any other most other European countries. But yeah, so and apparently they're going serious with this. Like Hungary's going to stop getting EU grants. They're basically in the most important way that any country is part of the EU. They're like financially, where they get certain countries, with smaller GDPs, whatever, would get a lot of support, financial support from the EU. That's being, at least it's being tabled to cut it off, basically, and in that sense oust them in a certain sense, in all but name from the EU. Because
Part of the squirming with using inventing new terms is that they're constantly suppressing the realization that most people in Europe don't like them, would never vote for them. In that headline is the implicit statement that most people in Hungary would not side with the EU against Orban. So, as a democracy, it is against the EU. They can't have that. So to suppress that or to cover that up, they have to come up with something.
Call it an electoral
And
autocracy.
to present it as unusual or an outcast in Europe, when in fact that's almost certainly the status quo in all European countries. Whenever there's been a vote by European peoples on European issues, they always vote no. That's why they stopped doing referenda on EU enlargement and integration.
Consolidation of power.
Yeah. They just stopped it 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
So when people go to free and fair elections and elect a dictator, is he a dictator? Is he an autocrat?
No, of course not.
Apparently,
In our
apparently he
common
can
sense
be.
definition of the term, of course not.
But so common sense is out the window. Okay, just making as long as we know that common sense is out the window, we don't have to take any of this stuff seriously because it's ridiculous. Then okay. So moving on, let's move on to let's do a bit on Ukraine, since that leads into stuff that was happening over in the further east, with the CTO this week. We talked about last week about the Ukrainians winning. They were winning.
Yeah, and it was all doom and gloom.
They were winning bigly in Ukraine. They,
according to the
took
media,
back
Moscow is next.
right, they took back Izium, and it was all going wrong for Putin. And Putin's teetering; he's on the brink. It's all going wrong. Meanwhile, Putin's laughing it up with the global South leaders over in Uzbekistan. They surprisingly, I don't know if I need to put this up or not, but I'll put it up anyway. To my great shock and surprise, I saw that once they had retaken Izium in the northeast of Ukraine, i.e. the Russians basically just left and redeployed further south mainly. They found within a few days mass graves and torture chambers in quotes at least, after the Russians were driven out i.e. the Russians left of their own accord, effectively. Ukraine says hundreds are buried in wooded site near liberated city of Izium. This is the Bucha thing, where this is just done on purpose as part of the information war. I mean, people need to understand that this is absolutely part of the information war, because if you look at pictures, I mean, I don't know if there's any pictures, there's a video in this, but you can see pictures of it. The pictures have actually published as evidence for their claim that there are mass graves. There are actually, quite a lot of graves, but they all have crosses on them. A lot of them have numbers on them, dates on them, and some of them have pictures on them. So
That's why none of the headlines say unmarked graves.
Right.
Because they're specifically marked.
Right. Mass graves. But a mass grave is generally understood to be a big hole where a lot of bodies are put into it and it's covered over. These are rows, fairly, neatly and deliberately laid out rows of graves with crosses on all of them, like I said, with some with identifying markers, I suppose, that of the date or some names on them. In some instances, pictures on them of the person who's in the grave. So I just couldn't understand how it can be construed as a mass grave, as is commonly understood, as some kind of a war crime, when what seems happened here was that the Russian military had actually bothered, which isn't very often the case, had actually bothered to properly, at least to the extent that they could, properly bury Ukrainian soldiers that had been killed, and maybe civilians as well, in graves. But that's turned into some heinous crime by the Russians. And what happened actually, it's interesting because this is like I said, part of the information war, and it's designed specifically to G up or to encourage, to re-encourage, let's say,
Hatred of Russians.
well, no, support for Ukraine primarily. Hatred for Russians, but primarily for support, Western support for Ukraine and Western popular people support for what their governments are doing, i.e. funneling large amounts of money and all sorts of other, pursuing all sorts of other decidedly negative policies towards Russia and domestic policies in European countries, specifically related to energy infrastructure, under the guise of support Ukraine. It's supporting Ukraine democracy, stop Putin, evil Putin, protect democracy in Ukraine and in Europe, etc., etc. That's what this is for. So it's negative propaganda against Russia to encourage continued support for Ukraine by European peoples and by Americans. The same thing happened in Bucha. It's actually, I remember at the time, whenever when the Bucha situation was in the news, there was a report on that event, or the details surrounding it, and there was a quote from a UK military person who was involved in the whole organization of weapons deliveries, etc., to Ukraine. And he said, they quoted him explicitly, saying that the Bucha thing really caused them to double down on their support for Ukraine, which I thought was the most interesting, really the only important thing about, in a certain sense, about the Bucha situation, because it's just one of many incidents in the general war. But this, because the way it was propagandized and publicized in the media to Western populations, it had this impact on at least this guy and probably many others like him, to make them feel we really got to double down and really commit to our support for Ukraine. Now this is exactly the same, but again, it's fabricated. There's no substance to the claims that are being made here that this is some kind of a war crime. It's like, this is a war. People, primarily Ukrainian military personnel, are dying in large numbers, as we've seen. And in this case, the Russian military, before they left, took the time and effort to actually bury them. That's what the headline should be. It's a long headline, but that's what the headline should be. But instead, it's mass grave and torture chambers.
Yeah. No, the real world is complete opposite. They were actually buried by LPR, militia fighters.
Right.
So basically, within the context of a Ukrainian civil war, the one side just abandoned, had no interest. They were constantly contacted. Do you want to come and take the thousands of dead bodies that litter? No, they just ignore. Because if they do that, you bring home to people back in Kiev, Western Ukraine, and in the West, just how many of them have been killed. Mm-hmm. So they don't touch the bodies. They just let them rot. So LPR and DPR fighters brought in priests and actually buried with a mass or a blessing in marked graves with a categorization process for the future, so that when Ukraine, whatever,
So family
however it
members.
ends, they could identify people. They went in and wrecked those markers. So they didn't, when they took photos like the one we just saw, you weren't able to see that there was a cross with a reference number on each one. They just took it's so macabre.
Well,
They
there are
do-
pictures of all the crosses.
In some, yeah, okay, but I've seen them as well. Where they just remove them, and so the photos are just like a forest with holes in them, you know.
Right. Well,
And so now, it's just super macabre. They're not only completely inverting reality, like you say, they're using it to, in fact, make the Russians out to be particularly evil. It's predictable. It's predictable for us. It's obviously not for people who are following the current thing. The other development, naturally, is that the Ukrainian forces have been torturing and killing collaborators in the so-called liberated territory. There's actual evidence for that. Now, as soon as our show ended last week, there was a barrage of cruise missiles last Sunday, knocked out power stations, a dam.
that was a few days later, a
Nikolaev.
day later, yeah.
So there was a response. Just for over like 2 or 3 days, anyway.
Yeah. Again, well, it speaks to what Putin said before, which is that they haven't really done much in that sense. Haven't really started. They haven't really launched an all-out attack, let's say, or an all-out war on Ukraine. And that's for people who keep on questioning, insultingly referring to Russia's term for the conflict as a special military operation. That it's actually a war. Stop calling it a special military operation. Stop calling it a special military operation. That's because it really is, like, in terms of how modern warfare would be conducted by a country like Russia. Well, you look at the way what the Americans did in Iraq with their shock and awe, 500 cruise missiles in the first night, knocking out all sorts of doing. What the Russians did to some extent earlier this week, and then invading the country with 200,000 troops, and overrunning the country basically. That's a war. Russia hasn't done that. It can still do that if it wanted to, but obviously it doesn't see the need to, and is progressing slowly as it had planned to from the very beginning. And again, Russia's intent, as we've talked about before, Russia's intent in this is obviously to secure Donbass and Crimea, which was the intent of the Ukrainian military, was to try and in the lead up to this in February, the intent over the past number of years was for the US and the UK, its allies, etc., to they've been equipping, arming, funding, training, etc., the Ukrainian military with the intent of attempting to retake or overrun Donbass and take back Crimea, and then from there, who knows what else. But and that's why Russia invaded in February. Primarily, I mean, as much as they said it was to protect the people of Donbass, it was, and to keep Crimea. It's like those two areas are, well, Crimea is slightly separate, but Donbass, certainly the eastern of Ukraine, is a buffer zone. They want to create a buffer zone, as any country would. When there's an enemy on your border, you don't want the enemy right on your border. You want a space between you and the enemy, and the Donbass serves that purpose, and that's what they're aiming to achieve. There's still quite a bit of the actual geographic Donbass that the Russians don't hold, and their intent is to continue on until they hold all of the Donbass at least, and obviously keep Crimea and as much of the southern coast, possibly all of the southern coast, as possible. Of course, the other angle is how this all started and how people. I mean, it just annoys me when. I mean, I shouldn't be annoyed anymore because it's ridiculous. People who comment on this situation and are commenting on this situation on Twitter, and even supposedly intelligent people, obviously have no understanding at all of the geopolitics of it. They don't understand it at all. So they may as well be talking about something completely different. So I don't engage with them at all because they don't understand really anything about this conflict. You could try and tell them that it started basically in 2014 when the US, on record, was directly involved in overthrowing a democratically elected leader, the democratically elected leader of Ukraine, and installing a pro-Western regime. And as a result of that, a section of eastern Ukraine decided they didn't want to be a part of the country that had, was subject to a US-backed coup and an undemocratic, the undemocratic imposition of a new government. They decided, okay, we want to leave. And they have every right to do that under international law, with the reference of Kosovo being rubber stamped by the West, that's fine to do whenever you don't agree, that you don't want to be part of a country for whatever reason anymore, you're allowed to leave. And the West decided to say, no, you're not allowed to, and we're going to support the Ukrainian government in trying to stop the people of the Donbass or eastern Ukraine from making that decision that they don't want to be part of Ukraine anymore. An analogy might be if, and remember, you have to remember as well that in the whole Euromaidan thing, Ukraine's 40 million people. The whole Euromaidan thing in 2014 that led to the coup and everything that has happened since, there were maybe somewhere on an average day 50 to 100,000 people in Kiev, primarily. Few other smaller numbers of people around the country, but it really happened in Kiev. And this was then seen as representative of the entire country. And I mean, remember, 40 million people, 50 to 100,000 protesters got to decide for the other 40 million where the country was going to go. And when a section of the country decided, listen, we don't agree with you, we don't want that to happen, they get bombed for it and called terrorists. An analogy would be in Washington, D.C., scale it up. Ukraine is maybe 5.5 times less population, or America is 5.5 times the population of Ukraine. Imagine, so scale that up to 500,000 or even 1 million people. Imagine you had 1 million people in Washington, D.C. who protested for weeks and weeks and weeks and then effectively overthrew Biden. Or let's say overthrew Trump. Or no, let's say overthrew Biden and installed the opposite of Biden. Trump. And as a result, California, which has about the population of Ukraine, said, listen, this is a dictatorship, this is ridiculous, this is an undemocratic coup, sponsored by Russia and China, supported by them, and you've overthrown the government that we supported and imposed the exact opposite, and we as Californians, 40 million people, want to leave the Union. Then Trump, the newly installed Russian, Chinese-backed dictator, starts to wage war in California. What do the international community think about that? What do Americans think about that? What do Europeans think about that? Who do they support? That's a good analogy. Because there's 40 million people in California. There's 40 million people in Ukraine. Which is, roughly, let's say in terms of Donbass, and California is representative of the population of. That's an example, but that's an example, just a very short description, maybe oversimplified, but still fairly accurate description of what happened. And the vast majority of people commenting on the current situation in Ukraine have no understanding of that whatsoever. That's the context in which the invasion of Ukraine is happening. So why would you bother even talking to them, They may as well be talking about a war on some other planet.
Yeah. I'm more interested in what the people who are drawing interesting crowds to their commentaries on Ukraine are saying. Yeah. As we noted last week, they were all doom and gloom about what had taken place. All of them. Maybe not Scott Ritter. He was like, yeah, it's a battle, so what? Yeah. But the others were like, oh, it was either like Putin's got up his game, or Putin made mistakes, or the Russian military made mistakes, or, the whole thing was shoddy from the start because they never had enough force of men and numbers, etc., and weapons to do what it seemed they wanted to do. But, yeah.
I don't think most people really understand what...
Putin was asked about it when he was in Tashkent. And he's just like, well, they launched a counteroffensive. And he said, we'll see how that ends. Yeah. And smiles. Next question. Yeah. But he doesn't seem that
no, he's not on the brink, right? He's not teetering. He's not about to collapse physically or politically or anything like that. Doesn't seem to be.
You remember the first month, like, any day now, Moscow's about to fall. Putin's going to be overthrown. Yeah. We just need to keep at it. Confuse Russian people. Tell them some truth, some lies. It's about to fall. The latest poll numbers from like an actual Russian polling group that the West considered reliable. So they factually reported on what this poll said in Newsweek and Bloomberg, etc. last week. Putin's numbers are as high as they've ever been, increased recently in the last quarter or whatever. However often they do it, to 80.5 or something, 81.5% support. So, yeah, them sanctions are working great.
Yeah. Well, sanctions probably are working to a large extent because what people don't understand about sanctions, they pitch it in these kind of moral terms as though it's like this is a moral, and it might hurt us more than it hurts, or as much as it hurts him or whatever. But they're working and blah 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 blah. And when they say sanctions are working, what are sanctions effectively? Sanctions are a threat by the Western companies or Western governments to prevent effective threats that prevent all businesses, European businesses, for example, or any other businesses, from doing business with Russia. Who do they have to do business with then? You know what I mean? Anybody who's actually, financially aiding, buying products, let's say, from Russia, you're not allowed to buy those products anymore. Who do you buy them from? What do you buy them from us? So sanctions are, first and foremost, a purely self-interested, financially, they're purely financial self-interest on the part of the country imposing sanctions. Short-term, immediate gain. Forget about the actual knock-on effects in a certain sense. If we can't supply you, for example, Europe can't buy products from Russia anymore, but can't buy energy from Russia. You have to buy them from us, so we'll make a load of money.
You're talking about the United States. But there
The
isn't
United
even
States.
enough. And
Exactly,
even
well,
American companies, even the American government is saying we don't have enough
Right,
for you.
but it's good. But that's
So
good.
it's worse than that even.
Well,
it's
it's
even
worse than
more
that.
than pecuniary self-interest of
If-
the Americans.
if-
The European leaders are going along with this for other reasons as well.
Yeah, but I don't give much credit to foresight or long-term thinking on their part.
It might be that bad.
I think
like von der
it's-
Leyen, like you're saying, what are sanctions really for? And you're giving an explainer here. Von der Leyen reiterated this week that the sanctions are working. Russia's economy will be, quote, in oblivion soon.
Well, she's
Does
saying
she really
that
believe
because-
that?
Well, in the same
She's
way-
telling the whole full room of MEPs.
and everybody's lapping it up because they're all making money, from this policy effectively. The other angle to the whole crisis is, strong political leadership in a crisis. It justifies their jobs. Any crisis that comes along for any country, especially when the enemy is outside their borders, needs a strengthening of the political leadership, which very often includes increased salaries, increased perks. You know what I mean? Because we're going around, we're doing stuff. You know what I mean? People don't give as much credit to that aspect of it as they should because they're not, they're encouraged all the time to think of it in moral terms and we're fighting a good fight and we're making sacrifice and stuff. These people aren't making sacrifices. They're making money hand over fist in one way or another, either directly from sanctions or simply from the fact of this crisis where they have to, it's job justification where they're solidified in their positions as leaders who are needed because there's a crisis. Politicians love crises because, like I said, it's job justification. Otherwise, they might be out in their ear and then be voted out the next time, Of course, that's what they think.
Well, you can't. Yeah. The
only way these
point taken, though. Just as a side note, you can't vote them out. in
No,
Europe.
well, they might be
They can't.
they might be removed in some other way.
Yeah, the voting part is done.
Right. Well, when that happens, they end up getting dragged out.
Do you think
Or
we'll
it's
see
one
that in our
It's one
lifetime?
possibility. If things get bad enough, they'll be dragged out.
Revolution in Europe.
Some form of it. What about Armenia and Azerbaijan? What about
Let's start with them.
What about the
No.
Azerbaijanis?
Oh, yeah, Azeri.
Azerbaijan used to be called the what was it called? The Republic of BP. Remember that?
by that
John
American.
Oh, Chris Hedges.
No, American Jewish guy. We had him on one of our earlier shows. He wore a funny hat. Greg, someone.
Yeah. Okay.
Republic of BP. I think he coined that
Right.
because he had been there and he'd done reporting about it. The gas. Let me. I want to put a map up.
Yeah.
Which one is it?
In broad strokes, Armenia is part of the.
Oh, here it is.
Armenia is part of the CTO, the CSTO, which is a kind of alliance, a loosely based alliance of, it's a collective security treaty organization, and it's officially called an intergovernmental military alliance in Eurasia. Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, and Tajikistan. So Armenia is part of that, and so in theory, Armenia is Russia aligned and Eastern aligned, whereas Azerbaijan with its history of being the Republic of BP, would be American aligned in a certain
It's
sense, or at least has
super,
more.
super complicated. So
Yeah.
this is the Caspian Sea on the right. That's Turkey on the left. Iran to the south, Russia to the north. Look at this is the state of things today, right? That's Armenia, left side, right side, Azerbaijan. The enclave that's the same color as Azerbaijan is disconnected from the main body of Azerbaijan, and it's on the far side of Armenia.
Right.
The part they were fighting over, this erupted really in 2020, the
The red-
Nagorno-Karabakh war, lasted about 6 months, I think, is the disputed part, just the red part. Nagorno-Karabakh is internationally recognized by everyone as being in Azerbaijan proper, but it's overwhelmingly ethnic Armenians, okay? Then you've got the dark brown part that's also majority ethnic Armenian, but not actually in the disputed part for now anyway, also in Azerbaijan proper. Anyway, so the 2020 war kicked off, really was the first major flare-up. Consider that 2020 was the first flare-up in 30 years since the collapse of the USSR, which kept this whole region stable. So Azerbaijan and Armenia kick off in Nagorno-Karabakh province, which is inside Azerbaijan proper. What happened last week is that Azerbaijan forces went into and shelled Armenia proper. So they bypassed the disputed part within Azerbaijan and went direct to Armenia. 200 plus dead soldiers, mostly Armenian. Everyone agreed it was definitely started by Azerbaijan. It was on September 12th. Immediately, mass protests erupted in Yerevan against the Prime Minister Pashinyan, I forgot how you say his name, and they attempted to storm parliament. The government nearly declared martial law in Armenia. I think that's on again, off again. It's currently not the case. Armenia calls Moscow, triggering CSTO meeting. The outcome is a bit unclear, to say the least. Eurasian, which is kind of a pro-Western portal, shits on Putin in it, saying, well, he was kind of a bit vague about what. Yeah, we'll keep talking, and you two stop fighting. That has been the case. I think 200 died in 2 days, and for the most part, the fighting has stopped. I don't know if the Azerbaijani troops are still inside Armenia's borders, but there is a kind of ceasefire right now. Main point, look at that, how bloody complicated that is. Georgia to the north has two parts that have they unofficially succeeded from Georgia and want to join Russia. Obviously, you've got Turkey. There's a nice clean border there between Turkey and Iran, but remember, smack overlaying that border between Turkey and Iran, you've got self-styled Kurdistan, which Turkey has obviously a major long-standing issue with. So does Iran with the Kurds in that whole region.
It's a mess.
Then you've got Israel. Israel is all over this thing. They're trying to stay very, very quiet, but there's enough reporting about the enormous quantity of weapons Israel has been flying up north, along Turkey, around Armenia, over Georgia, bypassing Russia and down into Azerbaijan. I have a report here. Israel accounted for 20%, about a third of Azerbaijan's major arms imports from the decade 2011 to 2020. But from 2016 to 2020, Israel accounted for 2/3, 69% of Azerbaijan's arms imports. A number, for context, that represents almost 20% of Israel's total arms exports for the entire period. So Israel's got an interest. The interest is so large that last week when some people were caught filming in Baku in Azerbaijan, celebrating their sides picking up the fight against Armenia by waving the Israeli flag. And they're like, okay, well, so what? Well, Azerbaijan is majority Muslim. Armenia is basically Orthodox Christian. I think it's Russian, maybe not Russian, but Orthodox Christian. Then there's Iran. This kicks off last week, and Iran sends something like 50,000 troops to its border with Azerbaijan. You think Iran and Azerbaijan, we're both Muslim, we're on the same side?
Right.
No, kind of not. Iran is worried as hell, and they stated as such, about this unbelievable volume of weapons that are coming into Azerbaijan
Mm-hmm.
because they know the Israelis are up to something, and
Well,
it's got
Israel-
them in their sights, not so much Russia.
Israel gets 40% of its energy from Azerbaijan,
There's that.
and yeah,
Von der Leyen was in Azerbaijan recently. It's funny, actually. People said,
an
well,
energy
that's
war.
interesting. We're going to increase gas supplies from Azerbaijan to replace the volumes we've lost from Russia.
Right.
And then did that facilitate Azerbaijan getting a green light? You know, a week later, the shit kicks off, you know?
yet at the same time, this is from a geopolitical perspective. It's interesting for the US in terms of causing problems on Russia's border, because obviously you have a border here with Russia, and you would expect in the situation that that the US would be all over Azerbaijan, and well, they have actually said, "Poor Azerbaijan, Armenia is evil. Stop doing it." But at
Well,
the same time,
Pelosi.
at the same time, Pelosi heads to Armenia to I think in Yerevan,
Yeah.
to the capital. Here she is. She's at. Of course, there's a whole Armenia. There's a whole Armenian genocide thing, which is an Armenian Turkish thing that has never really been resolved back in what was it, 1915. A long-standing historical grievance on the part of the Armenians that the Turks during the First World War carried out a genocide basically against Armenians. Anyway, we listen to Hayden Pelosi here. Did she? Oh my goodness. Anyway, that's her putting on a show, putting on a good stunt, of course. The thing, stop. I don't think she really does much else except pretends to blub for a little bit more.
For the children.
For the
For the
children.
children.
She's doing it for the
For
children.
the children.
For the children. So, she, her doing that
Yeah.
will piss off the Turks.
Oh, big time. Why? Any ideas why the US so blatantly weighed in on? Because they're obviously behind both sides here.
They're
But
also, well, they're not happy about Turkey. You know, so this is seen as a, you know, we don't care basically in a certain sense. But weighing in on both sides, yeah. I mean, I think the only explanation for why they're weighing in on both sides in that respect is because of the broader geopolitical aspect of it as a tool. Because this is like both countries are effectively on Russia's border. Okay, Armenia is separated by Georgia, but Georgia's, you know, possibly could be stoked again, and Azerbaijan obviously is on Russia's border. So anything that you can, like, I mean, the fact that
the narrative, mainstream narrative, it's basically simple as Azerbaijan's with Turkey and Russia's with Armenia.
Yeah.
Russia has a military base in Armenia. This is true. But things have happened in recent years that muddy that water. This prime minister of Armenia, didn't he come to power 3 or 4 years ago in a color revolution-y type thing?
yeah.
Was
Again,
Russia behind it? Did they support it?
that area?
Not behind it, but did they? Yeah, I think they.
That area of the the Caucasus basically is obviously, it was in the past a focus, you know, an important focus for American geopolitical interests specifically in terms of creating problems on Russia's southern border. I mean, anywhere Russia can, or anywhere the US can stoke tensions there or cause problems. The fact that Armenia calls effectively Russia in a certain sense to say, listen, you know, ask for CSTO involvement or mediation in this, you know, it's good for America in a certain sense because it puts pressure on Russia. So America wouldn't want to be seen to, you know, taking one side or the other, because ideally they would want to court both Armenia and Azerbaijan. You know what I mean? Get both of these countries in our sphere, bring them closer to our sphere of influence, meaning we have more options to put pressure on Russia. So yeah, they're not going to take sides. Like you said, you would assume that they'd be pro-Azeri and anti-Armenian, but it's in the broader context. It's like, well, both of them. We don't want to piss off either. We don't want to take sides.
Yeah.
We'd rather let Russia take sides.
the kind of historical or cultural or social pressure from within Russia, though, is to support Armenia
Of course, yeah.
and to see it as such, as
Well, they're
Azeri
Orthodox
aggression
Christians.
against Armenia. So at least there was that CSTO meeting, a virtual meeting. Was it the same day that the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting kicked off? Now, that took place over 2 or 3 days, but some of the photos that came out of there, who's a member of it or observing / dialogue partner / soon to be a member? I think Turkey wants in.
Yeah, well, they're there, yeah.
Either way,
Iran was in
Erdogan was there up front on all the photos. He's walking arm in arm with Putin at one point. And who's also there, you know, when they have their no ties, relaxed, casual, all snacking around a big table. There's Erdogan holding fort with Putin. I didn't see Xi there, but the other key thing was not just the Central Asian leaders, so the host, basically, the president of Uzbekistan, but also the leader of Azerbaijan.
Yeah.
Aliyev, I think his name is.
As a...
So he's supposed to be on the other side from Putin, but they're all sitting
They're-
together on the same
There are
sofa.
three separate. There's members, observers, and dialogue partners.
Yeah.
So the full members are China, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Russia, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. So all the stands plus China, India, Pakistan, and Russia. Observers: Afghanistan, Belarus, Iran was admitted as a
Full
an
member.
well, it has been an observer and it's being admitted as a full member. And then dialogue partners are Armenia, Azerbaijan, Cambodia,
Both.
Egypt, Nepal, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Sri Lanka, Turkey. So I mean, between those three, it's apart from Africa, it's most of Asia. It's like all of Asia. It's probably like 4 billion people or something like that. I mean, governments that rule over 4 billion people, you know.
Yeah, it's greater Eurasia. The Eurasianist map, probably made by Dugan 15, 20 years ago, is kind of coming real. Although the caveat though is that this is Shanghai cooperation.
Right.
This is always going to be a
Well,
Chinese.
It's one belt, one road. You know, China's Eurasian kind of integration, I suppose.
A
its
side note,
economic plans.
I don't know if you want to discuss it separately, but this SCO summit, I thought it was interesting. One belt, one road. It's in Samarkand. It's not the capital of Uzbekistan, but Samarkand was the old capital of, I can't remember, Khorasan or something in medieval times. The last time the one belt, one road was
A thing.
an earlier iteration, the Great Silk Road of the Mongolian time.
Yeah.
And of course, not so much the Mongols, but just prior to that, when the whole of Central Asia became Muslim, there was a really fantastically, I suppose, a flourishing, economic and artistic flourishing. Also scientific, there was a kind of a really brief but pronounced period of civilization in the best senses of the word at that time. Samarkand that's why it was probably chosen. It still is a fantastic, as amazing landmarks from that time. So it's an interesting, symbolic place for this to happen. The other side note is that this is the first time Xi Jinping has left China since 2019.
In 2019.
Yeah, he hasn't left because COVID, right? He's
Yeah,
been
yeah.
He's been full. Remember, we know that, and our listeners know that that's not because he's scared of the COVID. That's because he's scared of the COVID as delivery method for other potential things. He's probably taken it very seriously. He himself has sort of been on international lockdown. He doesn't want to go out because he knows that he's probably at risk or something. But the Western media spun, they just flipped it all on its head. They spun the fact that Xi's first meeting is to go meet, primarily, right, he's going to see Putin, of course, as Putin coming, quote, cap in hand to Xi for help because Russia's losing so badly on the economic front in this great big war against the West.
It's nonsense.
That is all. Anyone in the West, if they paid any attention to this event, that's all they
got,
know.
yeah.
Putin went cap in hand to China for money.
Yeah.
The other part of it was Xi was distancing himself from Putin.
Yeah.
He left China for the first time to meet Putin.
Well,
It's the opposite of
Yeah.
what they're telling you.
Pretty
He's
much.
distancing himself from every other Westerner. He was invited to the Queen's funeral. I'm not going. Okay. Obviously, there's Russia, Ukraine. There's Armenia, Azerbaijan. Another fire that nearly flared up was Kosovo, Serbia in August.
sort of, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that, and then we have
The Belarus color revolution in 2020, and then 2 days after Armenia and Azerbaijan kicks off again, we've got Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. Now, this is far closer to Samarkand in Uzbekistan, where this event was held. Okay, here's another map for context.
crazy
Where we're
context.
looking at. The timing is kind of the giveaway here of a hidden hand. The timing and some other data, as we'll see, about what went down in these border clashes. They're not as serious as Armenia, Azerbaijan, but it could be. I think 80 or 90 people dead at this point. Civilians, a lot of them civilians as well. There's an X factor here. Armenia and Azerbaijan so far are killing soldiers. So this is zoomed in, but you should I've zoomed it in deliberately. I wanted for people to see, look how bloody complicated that is and how easy it would be to abuse that situation, right? These are the lines as drawn from the end of the USSR. For the last 30 years, it's worse than Armenia, Azerbaijan situation. I don't know what language this is in, but that's Tajikistan to the south, Kyrgyzstan to the east, Kazakhstan to the north, and Uzbekistan. Look, it's like a knot. Uzbekistan wraps around Tajikistan. It tucks into Kyrgyzstan. Kyrgyzstan itself wraps around Uzbekistan and tucks back into Tajikistan. In addition, there are islands. Uzbekistan has islands within Kyrgyzstan. Tajikistan has islands within Kyrgyzstan. Tajikistan has also islands within Uzbekistan, and you can see how it's just like a recipe, how easy it would be to provoke that, right? Mm-hmm. Having said, it is remarkable that for 30 years, it has been stable, at least on the war front. It has been relatively stable. And that is why the timing of this is all the more strange, because what happened this week, 2 days after Armenia and Azerbaijan flares up, it looks like a very well planned military type operation from Tajikistan in the south there into Kyrgyzstan took place. So for context, there was a border clash last year. So in 2021, it was the first time it flared up in 30 years. About 40 people were killed. But this one that just happened on September 14th, this year, we've got about 80 dead.
Mm.
Okay.
The other thing we didn't mention was Kazakhstan earlier, which is the north of all of these, directly to the north of all these. Kazakhstan's right there. But Kazakhstan there was an attempted, what appeared to be an attempted color revolution, 2 months? 2 months ago?
January, this year.
Yeah.
Just a few weeks before Ukraine kicks off.
Right.
And by the way, to those who are shitting on Putin now for the CSTO being useless to come in and do anything about it, that triggered a CSTO clause. There was a meeting. Troops were sent in. Yeah, they were mostly Russian. Of course they were. That's always going to be the case. But, for example, Armenia sent 100 troops as part of its CSTO delegation. That thing was dealt with overnight. It was gone. Done. Dusted.
It's interesting though, all of these in this particular area, from Armenia all the way across Central Asia. You have that's like we mentioned. Well, if you include Belarus, let's not include Belarus, but that's three in the past 6 months. That's three different flare-ups of border disputes. Let's call them.
One of which
in
was
an area,
pretty much frozen for 30 years.
Right, in an area that is, to a large extent in Russia's backyard and under Russian, nominally at least under Russian security control, let's say. Is that a coincidence? Probably not.
Well, let's look. Here's some specific details about what took place on the 14th. This is from, again, Eurasian net. It's pretty much anti-Russia, pro-West portal, but it doesn't matter. They have some interesting. Did you get that, Scotty?
Yeah, it's not
Okay.
showing the images for some reason.
Okay, scroll down to on September 15th.
Just double. I think it was double.
No.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
That won't show you. Basically, the video is just 10 seconds. It's a guy from a Tajik side. He's hoisted a Tajik flag on a Kyrgyz school just over the border, whatever. On September 15th, the head of the Kyrgyz GKNB, which is sort of the security service, whatever, told reporters that bearded men in black outfits were involved in the assault on Kyrgyz border outposts the day before, so 14th. The suggestion appeared to be that Tajik offences were being led by individuals unaffiliated with the armed forces.
Boom.
Next paragraph, if you scroll down
ISIS.
a bit. A 10-second video that circulated on social media around September 16th shows groups of Tajik men, they assume, closely fitting the description. Several individuals, some in black t-shirts, other in camouflage gear, are seen checking their automatic rifles. The person filming is heard to say, "Here are our guys." It's not possible to establish whether they're irregulars or army personnel. And that's the article's on to explain, because they're not wearing any insignia. So that's really suspicious. Like, if you're going to go and raise the Tajikistan flag, you're not going to come, like, why would you pretend to be otherwise than Tajikistan? It makes no sense on the face of it. That very same day, on the 14th, I'm not sure how this fits with the overall SCO meetings, but that very day, Shoigu is meeting the defense ministers of Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan in neighboring Uzbekistan. So Eurasian that goes on to imply or suggest, maybe that suggests a Russian hand, diabolical. We'll have the leaders of both countries with us as we press go on starting a conflict between. No, that makes no sense. Not in a specific nor in the context. Obviously, the context of Russia does not want to start another fire in Central Asia.
Of course, yeah.
Russia's in the business of putting fires out. So someone is up to something here. So who is it? Well, who has been organizing joint regional drills between all the stands since 2004? The Pentagon. Who has been training special forces in both countries, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, for the last 15 years? U.S. Special Forces. So I'm not saying that's evidence enough of Uncle Sam having done this, but you saw the map. You saw how easy it would be to cause a border issue.
Right.
By the way, those borders aren't fixed. There are whole sections that are disputed, and they both agree just to stay back from where the imaginary line is. They're not even sure where they're fixed. This is a report from 2011. U.S. Special Forces helped train Praetorian Guards. There's a kind of a pejorative in the headline, because the headline makes it seem that, the Pentagon's only using special forces to help train those who protect the, quote, dictators of Central Asia. It's a lot more detailed than that. They actually trained the entire elite of the elite of those countries, or at least they trained them to some extent. The thing is, it's not that simple, either because those countries are, of course, heavily armed and equipped and trained historically by Russia. Russia has a base in both countries. The US did at one point during the war on terror have one in Tajikistan, but it's officially left in 2014, and that's actually come under Indian control. I found that out, finding out these facts today. India now has the lease on what was formerly a US base in Tajikistan. Again, it goes to show how complex Central Asia is. So when you have the SCO and you have Modi, the leaders of the stands, the leader of Azerbaijan, the Armenian guy was there as well, yeah. Putin, Xi, etc., meeting for a whole round of meetings, many bilateral meetings between each other, of course, but also roundtable meetings. Are you seriously going to tell me that these guys are so cunning and diabolical that actually that's all just smiles for the camera, while they're sending secret orders to their special forces to kick off as many border wars across Central Asia
Yeah.
as possible.
Mm.
You know, these places are poor, many of them. They're trying to develop the countries. They're trying to not have wars so they can have development.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the way I've just described it there, the interest is on the force that does not want development in Central Asia, that does not want a one belt, one road system.
Eurasian integration, yeah.
So the motive is really clear. The evidence obviously is only, you know, mystery gunmen with beards.
Yeah.
We know that Russia's warned in the past that, holy shit, you know, these guys could come pouring out of Afghanistan. That was why they had major war drills in the stands in
Right.
recent years, up to 75,000 troops, massive tank movements. Obviously, there's not going to be a wave of tanks coming from Afghanistan, but
A wave of Toyota pickups.
Toyota pickups, bearded guys, Allahu Akbar, who've had special training in
In Fort
special
Benning.
schools, some of them for sure. And those guys would then be coming back to poor Central Asian Muslim countries and recruiting all
Yeah.
kinds of
ISIS,
dipshits for-
ISIS in Syria all over again.
Yeah.
Or the Taliban, or whatever they want to call them, yeah. ISIS-K, no, wasn't that the Khorasan?
ISIS-K, exactly, yeah.
ISIS Khorasan.
Unfortunately, these things can. I'm pretty sure they're going to put a boot on all of this, stamp it out. But the latest I heard today is that Kyrgyzstan forces apparently shelled. I'm saying it's probably that reporting of it's probably accurate. Kyrgyzstan forces have apparently shelled a market in Tajikistan in retaliation. So the civilians been killed in this. In a sense, this is hotter than Armenia, Azerbaijan, because that one's limited to military contact. Civilians have been killed here. But civilians being killed is also a telltale sign that you've got a third force.
Yeah.
That it's not the actual military
Right.
of either country.
Yeah. So we'll have to wait and see, but I don't. Yeah, we'll see. There's a lot of aspects to it. You know, it's obviously. I mean, it's not like you were saying. It's for the first time in 30 years in Tajikistan and Kazakhstan. The first time in 30 years there was any problem, right? I mean, there's obviously other forces involved or other reasons. It's not just a border. It's not that it's a border issue. They didn't suddenly say, listen, we have a problem with the border again when it hasn't been a problem for so long. The same with Armenia and to a large extent Armenia and Azerbaijan. There's energy issues and food supply issues, but particularly energy issues that are, and even water control, rights over water and stuff. I mean, essential stuff that are being that are involved in this. It's a bit too complex to get into because you have to get right down to the nitty gritty, down to like almost ground level. But there's a lot of other factors that that are potential flashpoints, if you know what I mean. That unless they're negotiated, then they're ripe for being turned into a shooting war or shooting match, assuming someone is there to stoke it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
The one thing I want to maybe finish with a tentative but important piece of data is that RAND document.
right.
I came across last week. I'm trying to find it now. There was something weird happened with that. There are two issues with RAND that came up. One of them was someone found a segment from a report called Extending Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Basically overextending Russia. The title gives it away. It was from 2019 or something, and it listed things that might happen, not things we're planning to do, but things that could be like a pro-democracy movement in Belarus. Remember, this is the year before that happened.
Yep.
There could be an Armenian-Azerbaijan border clash. I forget the other list. A whole bunch of them.
Yeah, well, you can just open it there.
Do you have it?
Yeah, it opens in a player. That's basically the document, and RAND is one of the preeminent U.S. think tanks, and this is 2019. Paper titled "Extending Russia." A lot of interesting parts in it. One of them was One quote from it: 6 possible U.S. moves in the current geopolitical competition: providing lethal arms to Ukraine,
Bingo.
resuming support to the Syrian rebels,
Done.
promoting regime change in Belarus,
Check.
exploiting Armenian and Azeri tensions,
Yup.
intensifying attention to Central Asia, the
Definitely.
Kazakhstan,
That's what we just saw this week.
and isolating Transnistria.
Well, there's some mystery attacks in Transnistria that no one has officially claimed. Drone attacks that killed some Russian soldiers there.
Yeah. The rest of it was there are several other possible geopolitical moves discussed in other RAND research, but not directly evaluated here, including intensifying NATO's relationship with Sweden and Finland, pressuring Russia's
They've
claims.
since joined NATO.
Right, pressuring Russia's claims in the Arctic. That's kind of ongoing, and checking Russia's attempts to expand its influence in Asia.
That's the
That's
general.
all in a
gen-
2019 RAND think tank that informs U.S. policy, U.S. foreign policy. One of the think tanks that informs U.S. foreign policy.
Right.
3 years ago.
Isn't it strange then that as this real scroll down a little, I want to see is the RAND logo on that. It should be. There you go. It is. That's a legit. They admit. Oh shit! Look, it's on the URL rand.org. It's published. It's on their
course, yeah.
website. Extending Russia. This is a real bona fide RAND report. Isn't it strange that the same week there's what's supposedly, I think first pushed, I saw it by John Mark Duggan, the American cop dissident who lives in Russia. I don't know where he saw it, but supposedly it's a section from another RAND report that was leaked, i.e. it was more classified and it got published or leaked. And it refers specifically to deindustrializing Germany and to weakening Germany in Europe. Now, this one got more international attention because RAND, they said, that's not our report, that's fake news, which might well be the case. So there's a kind of fake RAND report and a fake, and therefore a legit fact check on it going around, while this one is actually a real one. This sort of fades into the background, you know?
Yeah.
I wonder if some kind of, that was a micromanagement of information that took place in real time. Possibly. Because well, the report speaks for itself. It's literally every single item they talk about 3 years ago has come to pass.
Yeah, and it's an example of how those think tanks really are just producing government policy, producing U.S. government foreign policy. I mean, they read it, the U.S. implements it, or maybe it's
just so obvious to them what ought to be done to mess up.
or it's already in
Eurasia.
process. They're getting their information from somewhere else. They're just the public face to produce public papers that validate what their connections within the intelligence communities have already figured out what they need to do.
Yeah.
I think it's more like that.
It's
not
more
that
like
these people-
RAND as a kind of workaround.
Right.
Really, it's the CIA wants to do this, but how do we make it not look like we're doing
right.
this?
Let's have a think
A
tank
private
publish
think tank over here.
publish a paper. Yeah. So it's not that they inform government policy, but they announce U.S. establishment, deep state policy through these corporations, through these think tanks.
Yeah, RAND issued a press release this week to say fake RAND report, quote, on weakening Germany. But they've no problem with this one on extending Russia.
Yeah. So why would you not believe that certainly it's to their advantage to weaken Russia, weaken Germany? And on that point, actually, since we're I mean, I know it's only one aspect of it. I think I just sent you something, Scotty, but that's not it. It's a Financial Times article, so we've only got the headline because it's behind a paywall. I haven't signed in. German drinks makers suffer as energy crisis hits carbon dioxide supplies. So that's just one example of. It's basically a fertilizer problem, which is interesting actually because Putin just announced recently that there's sanctions on Russia's one of the world's leading fertilizer producers, but they've sanctioned it, so they have a stockpile of fertilizer that they haven't been able to sell to, like, let's say to various different countries, and they're willing to give it away for free. But how dare you attempt to give your fertilizer away for free, particularly to countries in the south and in Asia and the Middle East and Africa that needed, that were at least made up the majority of the countries that purchased the fertilizer in the first place. But they have the stockpile now because of sanctions, and he said that we're willing to give it away for free. But
It's sitting in European ports.
It's well, either sitting in European ports or they're not letting it out of Russia because they're not allowed to ship it because it's I think it's ammonium nitrate gas. Basically, it's a gas initially that's part of the fertilizer production process, and there's a pipeline that runs through Ukraine from Russia where it's produced that goes through Ukraine down to the Black Sea where it's then shipped to various different countries. In Ukraine, saying no, you're not allowed to. We're not accepting any deliveries through Ukraine of Russian gas for fertilizer. But this carbon dioxide for the German soft drinks industry is a byproduct of that fertilizer production process. But because of the sanctions, there's German drinks makers may go out of business because they can't get the carbon dioxide to make your fizzy drinks, make their drinks fizzy, right? And at the same time, I just thought it was very interesting. I mean, it's obviously it's slightly disconnected, but at the same time, you have this thing going on. This is a new fabulous engineering project. It's called Carbon Removal Facility, and it's in the US. They're setting it up in Wyoming. It's going to be within the next year or two. They hope to capture carbon dioxide, right?
Capture,
The stuff
blah, blah.
so they're going to suck it out of the air, basically. Carbon dioxide that's really important for plant, healthy plant growth and stuff like that. They're going to attempt to suck up 5 million metric tons per year, which is equivalent of 5 million return flights between London and New York annually. Because there's your example, and so yeah, it's just like so companies are like going out of business because of the lack of carbon dioxide for a different reason, but at the same time in America, because of greening the economy and transitioning to the new dystopia, they're sucking it out of the air. And you know what they're doing? If you just scroll down, there's a little graphic down there, a little blue graphic below that. It shows how it works. So you've got you basically got renewables. You've got solar panels and wind turbines on the left that are actually providing power for this direct air capture giant big facility. It sucks all the CO2 out of the air and then pumps it down into deep rock formations. Dirty carbon dioxide. Get it out of the air and push it into the earth. And then what happens? It's basically the stuff
Which
you put in
point it
fizzy
gets
drinks.
fracked?
Well, the earth just burps, right? It does a giant and wrecks Wyoming or something like that. Anyway.
That's so mad.
But on a more serious topic, it's really serious, even though that's serious as well. The really serious topic is nuclear war. Nuclear war. What are we going to do? We're going to tactical nukes. Russia's going to tactical nukes. Haven't you heard? Russia's going to use tactical nukes. Anyway, 60 Minutes in the UK talked to Biden. Thankfully, we're only going to play 48 seconds of it because it's painful. But here's the Commander-in-Chief telling the American people via 60 Minutes what America would do to those evil Russians.
As Ukraine succeeds on the battlefield, Vladimir Putin is becoming embarrassed and pushed into a corner.
That's the narrative.
And I wonder, Mr. President, what you would say to him if he is considering using chemical or tactical nuclear weapons.
Don't.
Bad boy.
Don't.
Don't do it.
It will change the face of war unlike anything since World War II.
And the consequences of that would be what?
I'm
What
not
would the
gonna
U.S.
speculate that.
response be?
Do you think I would tell you if I knew exactly what it would be? Of course I'm not going to tell you. It'll be consequential. They'll
I've no
become
fucking idea.
more of a pariah in the world than they ever have been. And depending on the extent of what they do, will determine what response would occur.
Yeah, don't do it, Putin. It would change the face of war, unlike anything since World War II, when America dropped, the only country ever to drop nuclear weapons on Japan.
And probably, well, I'm not sure it was ever proven, but I'm pretty sure that they use tactical nukes in Yemen.
Don't, man. Don't do it, Putin. I'll open up a can of whoop-ass. Anyway, yeah. So that's Sleepy Joe there. Telling us all what's up. 60 Minutes. Who just knows that Putin's embarrassed. It's all going wrong. He's just in a fit of envy at the West and anger and frustration. He's going to push the tactical nuke button which activates Russian cyborg soldiers to release a suitcase nuke in Kiev. And no matter how many times Biden says, don't do it, Putin, he'll do it anyway. And then they'll change the face of war, and Biden's not sure what he'd do. He'd figure it out as he goes along. But he'd go for a nap first.
They might start saying that if the Russians use more cruise missiles or something bigger, they might claim that they use a tactical nuke. You know.
Yeah.
But the only real nuclear scenario would be if the Russians use it on the US directly.
Yeah.
I don't think there's no need to use it in.
No, not at all. Things are rock and rolling though. You see, there's an earthquake this morning in Taiwan, off the coast, just on basically the southeast coast of Taiwan. Rocking and rolling. Now look at those lights. Look at that per day. That's pretty shaky. 6.9 on the Richter scale, and just to scroll down, there's another one just below. A lot of buildings down and stuff. It's pretty bad. Like, it was very, very shallow. Like 4 miles or something deep, which is relatively very shallow for a shallow earthquake. Interesting though. There's a bunch more in that link. We'll put it. There's one just down a train rocking and rolling. Just go down.
I'm not sure if that bridge is from this earthquake.
This one is.
The problem is, you see, Taiwan has had.
Click on that train.
6 years ago, in 2016, 100 people were killed in a quake in Taiwan. In 1999, more than 2,000 people were killed by 7.3 magnitude. So,
par for the course.
Par for the course, but still, yeah, you do wonder. You do wonder about the timing. It's symbolically interesting, if nothing else. It looks like that's it, though. I think one building collapsed. I don't think it's a mass casualty event.
No, there wasn't a lot of people, but I mean, it was quite a lot of destruction, though.
Yeah,
it's a sparsely populated area, though.
Yeah, so, it wasn't Taipei in the
north.
So, but the biggest thing
for you this week,
Sleepy Joe has got to be worried about in the United States, is that awesome political stunt the governors of Florida and Texas pulled. That was just glorious. Sending migrants to Martha's Vineyard. They have Hillary Clinton. And then now the whole Democratic establishment's following suit. She called it literally human trafficking.
Yeah.
Literally. Called in the National Guard, booted them next day. Boom, you're gone. Then Abbott, governor of Texas, follows suit, sends migrants to Kamala Harris's house. I mean, that was just... It's an awesome stuff.
Well, it's fair enough. I mean, these are the people in Washington, D.C. complaining about it all, or basically opening the borders, let them in. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. But then when they come to their door, I mean, they can talk all they like about, we're an open country, we're a country of immigrants, let them all in, but they're all coming in into the kind of poorest regions of southern states in the U.S., particularly in Texas and Brownsville and stuff. And I mean, that's literally thousands of miles from Washington, D.C.
Yeah. The beauty of it is Martha's Vineyard and other places, they declare themselves sanctuary cities. So when the southern states and Trump and his wall, as a political virtue signal against it, they said, we're sanctuary cities, you're all very welcome here. But that was just for the Twitter clicks. When DeSantis says, okay, I'll take you up on that, he sends 50 to them, and they're like, what? You can't do that. This is outrageous.
You can't handle that many people.
We don't have the facility.
Yeah.
So then people were showing
I've only got a 12-bedroom house.
The marquee the Obamas had for his birthday party.
Yeah. Right.
Housed like 500 people in the middle of lockdown.
He has a house in Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
Obama. Anyway, it's all farcical, and it's getting increasingly farcical, and I think it'll only get worse, over the next X number, in short term. Next 6 months, it's going to get the farce is just going to go through. The farcical nature is going to go through the roof. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
there's going to be such a gulf between what's actually happening and what you're told is happening. It'll be, you gotta keep your wits about you. And
I think the European Union might actually go full fascist, like just declare the pace that von der Leyen is just like declaring emergency powers.
Mhm.
They still technically have to get agreement from member state governments. So, for example, she declares that this winter there's going to be a 15% forced ration on every household for
5%.
it was reduced, was it? I heard 15 initially. And then they come back and there's bartering and it's not so bad in the end.
You know,
But
yeah.
she wants to centralize the shit out of everything. And
You know,
I heard-
when you talk about symbolically, like they're going back to basically biomass, right? They're trying to push a lot of their greening of the economy is biomass, right? Burning wood, effectively, wood pellets, right? And that's green because, well, you're cutting down trees, right? And trees sequester CO2 if that's your idea of getting rid of CO2. But then it's because, we're replanting trees, and in 40 years those trees will, it's green in that respect. But the problem is that wood is more polluting than coal. Right? If you go back to hundreds of years or whatever, people were burning coal at the start of the Industrial Revolution, and before that to heat their homes, they're burning coal. Then they they're burning wood, right? They're chopping down trees to burn wood, and then they say, listen, okay, they discover in a certain sense coal. They start burning coal. It's much more efficient, burns hotter, all that kind of stuff. They move to coal, and then they find oil, and with that progression, you have the development of civilization.
and an increasingly greener trajectory.
Right.
In theory,
But-
they have polluted the shit out of
Well,
the planet.
whatever. Forget about pollution. Just increasing
Yeah.
civilization, the stuff of civilization, basically,
Yeah.
the industry, over that period from wood to coal to fossil fuels. And they want to basically turn it back. At the point
Yeah.
that today people are going back to like the 1600s, where in order to heat their houses or keep themselves warm and to cook food, they're going to have to use wood.
Firewood, yeah.
Which is like a regression. We're going back to the Middle Ages. Like, at least there's a move to effectively go back to the Middle Ages in terms of energy production, which implies, because it's associated with the progression of civilization and industry, the destruction of industry by the same token.
Well, speak for yourself, Joe. You peasants are going back to the medieval
Yeah,
period.
not you though.
The elites, of which I'm a member,
Remember?
we're taking off in our spaceships.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, we've already got a beautiful planet scoped out. It's
Oh,
all
yeah?
ready to go. We just need a few slaves.
Yeah.
Maybe you could, I'll put a word for you.
No, you can all have fun. You and all the drag
We
queens.
need about 5 million slaves. The rest of you can just eat gas if you like. We don't care. Eat firewood.
Eat wood.
You were asking before the show started. So, Neil, would it be food or fuel? Well,
No.
eat firewood.
Eat or heat, Neil. Eat or heat.
Eat or heat.
What's
What-
it going to be? Eat or heat?
Eat firewood.
You going to eat firewood?
Well, actually, in times past, when things got really desperate, they were eating grass.
Yeah.
Medieval France,
Is that
grass
great?
and mud.
Is that
That's not myth. That was taking
is that
place.
sustainable though? Is that environmentally sustainable?
No, that's what happens just before mass disease and plague,
Okay.
cholera, dysentery,
No, you're
typhus.
getting depressing now.
Well,
Don't be dooming.
if they
Neil.
want to go
Stop your
back to the
dooming.
medieval ages, you need a Black Death. That's what they're going to bring people to, unless they do something to stop these shitheads from going too far.
All right. On that uplifting note, with all your dooming, quit your dooming, Neil. It's all going to be fine. We're all going to march gloriously into a new green age where everybody will be better and happier. They'll own nothing and they'll be happy and
Yeah, I'm
And
sure.
dead.
Do you know what von der Leyen's job was before she became EU, whatever her job is now?
a drag queen.
She was Germany's defense minister.
Well, there you go.
Germany doesn't have a defense ministry anymore. The army is gutted. Thanks to her.
All the weapons are in Ukraine.
That's what she does. She strips assets and moves on. Upwards, promotion.
It's called creative destruction. With lots heavy on the destruction part for the people and very creative for the politicians. Anyway, past 2 hour mark, gotta go. Do stuff. Thanks for watching.
Chop firewood.
We got to chop firewood for dinner. Yeah, thanks for watching, listening, commenting. Don't forget to like, smash all the buttons, etc. We'll be back next week with another show. Until then, have a good week.
See you next
Bye.
week. Thanks for watching. Bye.
can't stop the signal now.